Hello, welcome back to the Ironside for our scout report of what we need to move forward next season. Now, I'm going to be as positive as possible and put to bed any negative emotions I have towards West Ham and our lack of signings and activity in the transfer market so far. I've got 9 players for you in 4 different positions. We're going to talk about them. A lot of them you wouldn't have heard of before, so we're going to talk about that. But before we do that, guys, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's go. Right, so we're going to jump into this little transfer dive. Dive into this transfer dive? No, that doesn't make sense. We're going to have a look at these players now. We've got 9 players for you, and we've got a left back, a right back, CDM, and centre mid. So I've got 2 in each position as a minimum. And with the CMs, I've thrown in an extra one because there was a nice little bargain that I saw there. And we need a lot of players in midfield because, as you'll all be aware, we've lost Lanzini. He's gone. Declan Rice is 3 feet out the door, and it's taking ages to get over the line. I wouldn't read too much into that. First things first, he will be going. These transfers with a large fee sometimes take a bit of time unless you're Man City. But yeah, anyway, we're going to dive into it. We're going to start at left back, then go to right back, CDM, centre mids. And the first player I'm going to talk about is Juan Miranda. He is a left-footed left back. He plays for Real Betis. He is 23 years young, and he is available for around £3 to £8 million. Now, I know in one of my previous videos I said that Emerson looked very good in the final, and I'm not going back on that. I think Emerson could potentially take the #1 left back spot, the #3 off of Cresswell this year, moving forward, even though Cresswell will probably be our club captain. But saying that, he is getting on a little bit, Cresswell, so we do need to look at replacements in future. So this player in Juan Miranda is a very, very viable option. It's cheap. He's got experience in Europe with Betis. He came through La Masia at Barcelona, promoted through that system, so they don't really promote duds. They seem to always hit the mark. Real Betis got him for a free from Barcelona. He's a Spanish international. He played 27 games last year, notched 3 goals and 4 assists. That's very good for a Real Betis player. And I think it's an improvement on what we have in our squad. Our squad is wafer thin. And if we're going to be in Europe next year, which we are, and compete domestically, we need to bulk out the squad. Our youth players aren't ready to be playing 10 to 15 games. And they're not ready to be starting games. I think that's evident by the fact that Moyes is reluctant to play them from the off. Some of them might be ready, but a lot of them I don't think are. So we need to bulk up in these areas. So Miranda is a inverted wing back. So it's very similar to what Cresswell does. Actually, no, it's not similar to what Cresswell does, but he would work very well in our system. I haven't really found any players to compare him to in his style of play because I haven't seen him play too much. But that is our first player, Juan Miranda of Real Betis. Now, if any of you guys want to look at these players yourselves, I use transfermarket.com. It's very good, has all their stats, transfers, comparisons of players, and all sorts. It's a very good site. It's pretty reliable. They do produce some nonsense sometimes, but you have to wade through that crap to find the real gems. Right, next one, on to the next player, which is another left back. He's currently at Barcelona, and that is Alejandro Baldi, or Alex Baldi. He is 19 years young. He is also a graduate of La Masia, and he is a very, very fast, exciting, inverted wing-back. So he played 38 games for Barcelona last year with 1 goal and 6 assists. Obviously, Barca won La Liga last year, so if he's starting for them, he's got to be a decent player. He is, again, an inverted wing-back, like I just said. He is available for a lot more than what Miranda would be. I say he's available. I think Barcelona would listen to options because of their financial strains at the minute. They listen to offers around and between 15 to 23 million. It's a lot of money, but his ceiling is so high. He has been injured recently, but this is a player that I think is going to go into massive things. He is very good defensively. His recovery pace helps out, and we lack that massively. We don't have pace at the back anywhere. Since we sold Ryan Fredericks, our our defensive recovery runs are so slow. We can't make it back. That's both flanks. Emerson's a little bit faster, and I think Kerr's a little bit faster than Kufal, but I don't fancy any team coming up against our fullbacks with pace is going to cause us massive problems. So it's something we need to look at. Now, left back isn't the most necessary position that needs looking at this summer, but it is definitely a position we need to improve on. As is the next position, which is right back. Like I've said before, Sufal is our number one right back for me. Ben Johnson, I know he's just won the Euro Championship with the under-21s. Congratulations. He's not good enough for me. He's not good enough for the Prem, and I don't think he's going to be getting much better. I think he's close to, if not hit his ceiling. So we should be looking at replacing him or bringing in someone to really challenge Sufal. Again, Kera can play there, but I think Kera was brought in as a centre-back, not as a right-back cover. He plays there because Johnson's lack of form, not because he's very good there. He did have a couple of good games towards the end of the season, especially in Europe, don't get me wrong, but his best position is centre-back next to Kera. So yeah, the first player we're going to look at is, his name's Joe Scally. He is a USA international and he is 20 years old. He plays for Borussia Mönchengladbach in Germany. He made 28 appearances last year, no goals, no assists. The reason why I'm looking at this player and I like the look of him is value for money. At 20 years old, you can get him for between 11 and 18 million. I think it's a steal. He's again very fast, very good in the ball, and his recovery and positioning is excellent. He's much like Sufal in that sense. His positioning is terrific. It's a player that I've watched not a great deal of, but again, like Alex Baldy, he has a high ceiling, and it's definitely something we should be looking at, the right back position. And this is someone that would slot in easily in Sufal's absence. Next one we're moving on to is another right back, and he has two names. It's either Wilfred Singo or Stefan Singo, and he is a Ivory Coast right back. He is also an inverted wing back. He plays for, who does he play for? Torino. He plays for Torino, and he is available between 8 to 12 million. A bit more of a budget option. Again, he's very fast, very good on the ball, and there is comparisons between him and Alphonso Davies. Now, I think that's because of the pace and power that Singo has. Is very similar to Davies. Last year, he played 31 games for Torino, 2 goals, 1 assist, so decent. He's from Ivory Coast. He starts for Ivory Coast. All of these players, internationals. By the way, every single one on this list has made international appearances. Singo is a player that would be more. I think he has more of an end product than what Sufal has, and he's got a lot more pace getting back. Now, defensively, he isn't as astute as Sufal, but he has the recovery pace and strength to get back in. And for let's hit in the middle, £10 million. With the incoming 105 million, it's a drop in the ocean for West Ham. So there are fullbacks that we're looking at. These would be nice to sign. It'd be nice to sign a left back and a right back. I'm not saying we have to go out and sign a left back and a right back. The next two positions is where we have to go out and sign players, which is CDM and centre mid. And this is a no-brainer. We've lost Declan Rice. We needed to improve on our midfield, even if we had Declan Rice. We're wafer thin there as well. Souček's struggling for form. He's not a Premier League starter anymore. Although I like Souček for what he does well, I think at the minute what he lacks supersedes what he does well. And for that reason, I'm looking at 2 CDMs and I've got 3 centre mids for you. And that's you can mix and match a few of them to get them in. But the first player we're going to look at is a bit of a stretch, to say the least. I don't think in a million years it's going to happen, but it's a player that he's ready made for the Premier League. He is a phenomenal footballer. He plays for AC Milan. His name is Ismail Banakar, or Banachur, something like that. He plays CDM, deep line playmaker for AC Milan. He played alongside Tonali last season, there isn't much between them. He's a very, very good player. He was at Arsenal. Arsenal bought him to European football from, I don't know where it was, but he's Algerian. They bought him in 15-16 season for £300,000. didn't quite make it. They shipped him off on loan, and then he's made his trade outside the Premier League, and he's ready to come back. Like I said, he's Algerian. He played 38 games for AC Milan last year, 3 goals and 2 assists. So for a CDM, he's a deep line playmaker, very much like he plays in the same mould as Sergio Busquets. Now, I'm not saying he's Sergio Busquets. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But it's the same type of player. He screens the back four and he sets up attacks. So that is what we had Declan Rice doing the year before last, which is where he probably had a better season. Or we had a better season anyway, because it allowed Souček to go forward. This is what we need to allow Souček to push on and do what he does best, which is break between the lines and get on the end of things, on the edge of the box and into the box. If you have a deep line playmaker or out and out CDM, that allows Souček to do what he does well, and it negates what he does poorly. So Ismail Benacar is I'm saying he's available. None of these players have said they're available, but we could test the water with a lot of these because we were a London club. We can promise European football, and for most of these players, first team football. Again, this is a bit of a stretch, but he'd cost around 30 to 40 million. And if we're going to drop that on James Ward-Prowse, I think this is a much better option for me personally. Although I like Ward-Prowse, he's a safe transfer because we know what to expect from him. This is a player that we have longevity because he's only 25, so we'll get 5-6 seasons out of him at the top level. With James Ward-Prowse, you're only going to get 2-3. So for the same amount of money, I think it speaks for itself. And the next CDM that I'm going to be talking about is someone that you probably haven't heard of. He plays for Valencia. His name is Hugo Guillamon. He is 23 years old. Again, he's a deep line playmaker, Spanish international, right-footed, and he plays in a similar mould to Toni Kroos and Cooper Miners. Now, again, I'm not saying he is those players. It's just the same type of player that he is. He likes to spray the ball out and he likes to break between the lines. So he's sort of a mix between what Benacar is and what Souček is. So he sort of would knit the two together. So with that, you probably couldn't pair him next to Souček because he needs someone to sit in order for him to do it. But his passing is very, very good. Short and long range passing is phenomenal. He's a Spain international. I haven't already said that, and he would be available for between 12 and 20 million pounds. Again, Valencia historically are a big club. I'm not too sure how they're doing now, but we could 100% test the waters with that. A very good player. Whether he's a bit lightweight for the Premier League would be a bit of a risk, but I like the look of him. He's a player that's very tidy on the ball, keeps the ball moving, which is what we need because we're so slow at moving the ball at the minute, and that's because we have lack of ball players in midfield. Declan Rice, for all his attributes, tends to pull out wide and then try a crossfield pass every time. So he's looking for Bowen or Benrahma. So it misses out Paquetá. Souček can't pass 8 yards, and Paquetá is the player that we want to be playing further forward. So we need someone in midfield to be able to knit the passes together, those tidy 1-2s, and move and transition from defence to attack without having to spread it long or knock him behind or hit Antonio, who's not going to be playing much this year. We need someone that can create space on and off the ball. And I think Hugo Guillamon is a perfect player for that. Now, that's the last of our CDMs. We're going to move on to the centre midfielders. And the first on our list is someone who we're heavily linked to. All of you would have heard about him now. I don't know how much you know about him, though. And that is Alex Scott of Bristol City. He is 19 years old, so extremely young, very, very high ceiling. He's been around for a couple of years. And ironically, this season wasn't his best season in terms of numbers. He had 41 appearances, 1 goal, 5 assists. I'm not saying that's bad, but for the amount of money rumoured to be knocking about for him, I think that's very, very high. But anyway, he is American, a box-to-box midfielder, advanced playmaker, shadow strike, anything. He could do anything in that centre midfield role, which is perfect. That type of player is perfect for us because you can ask him to do a job alongside a CDM. So he cannot be paired with Souček because Souček is not a CDM. So if you're buying me Alex Scott, you need to buy a CDM as well. And then you rotate Souček and Alex Scott because it doesn't work. Souček is not a CDM. His positioning is poor, he's slow, he's rash in his tackles, and I don't think is where you get the best out of him, personally. But anyway, Alex Scott, 19, he'd cost 20 to 25 million pounds. I think it's a bit of a risk, but it's the type of player that we need. And like I said, his ceiling is so high. The only thing that worries me with someone like Alex Scott, because he's already in England, is that I don't want him to see us as a stepping stone, which is the problem with the Declan Rice saga, which I alluded to in one of my previous videos. We're not a stepping stone. I don't want us to be a stepping stone. So we need to set out, if we're getting young players in, we need to make it clear to them that this is the expectations. So there was rumours that David Moyes said that he can't guarantee him starting place. And I'm not disagreeing with that potentially being true. What I'm disagreeing with is the way that the article was worded. Because if you're 19 coming from the Championship, you cannot be I don't care if you scored 50 goals. You cannot be actually no, maybe 50 goals, but you cannot be expecting to start in a Premier League team next season. Unless you stay with that team and getting promoted. If you're moving teams to a Premier League team from a Championship team, to be expected to start from the beginning is at 19 years old is very, very optimistic, to say the least. Now, I'm not saying he's not good enough to start. I'm unsure. I haven't seen a great deal of Alex Scott. I've seen a bit of him. I saw more of him last season than I did this for some reason. But again, that type of player is perfect for us. And that moves on to our next player who's very similar, and his name is Florian Neuhaus. Plays for Borussia Mönchengladbach. So he plays. Who else played at Mönchengladbach? It was Joe Scally. So they've got two players for Gladbach. So Florian Neuhaus. He's 25 years old. He played 21 games last year. 1 goal, 0 assists. He's a German international. Similar to Alex Scott, he can play an array of variations of the centre mid roles, so box to box, advanced playmaker, shadow striker, you name it, he can do it. He currently plays as a box-to-box midfielder for Gladbach. Now, there are a lot of comparisons for Neuhaus. The best one and the most apt one that I think is Gigi Wijnaldum, the guy who scored 4 goals for Newcastle against us a few years ago, then moved on to do massive things at Liverpool. He was a phenomenal player, not because he was technically better than everyone or anything like that, because his timing of the runs was perfect. The way he kept the ball in perpetual motion was perfect. He was always thinking forward, and that's what we need. We need a forward-thinking player. Maybe not at the same time that Paquetá's playing, unless you're going to ask Paquetá to drop back a little bit, because that mindset leaves massive holes. So if you're having a player like Neuhaus, Alex Scott, Wijnaldum, well, I'm not talking about Wijnaldum, but he's just what everyone knows. He creates spaces, so you need an out-and-out DM like Benacar or Hugo Guillamon to allow him to go out and create that space, because they can fill it, they can slot into that hole. And then you'll have Paquetá that naturally has quite a high defensive work rate, which is something we probably didn't know. Well, I definitely didn't know anyway. So Florian Neuhaus, a much cheaper option than Alex Scott. We could probably get him anywhere between 7 to 12 million. I reckon we could get him for about 9 or 10. And at 26 years old, he's still got a high ceiling. He might not pull up any trees with the signing, but again, it's a squad player that we need. We've just lost Manu Lanzini for free, which is mind-boggling. And we need players in there. And our last but not least on this little scout report, transfer, I don't even know what to call this, transfer list? Yeah, I think transfer list is probably the best way to describe this, is a player called Uros Rakic. He is Serbian, so it's probably Rakic. He currently plays for Valencia, but last year he was on loan at Braga. He's a box-to-box midfielder, deep-lying playmaker, so he's sort of somewhere in between a CDM and a centre midfielder. So this would work. He's very similar to James Ward-Prowse in that position that he'd like to play. Played 31 times for Braga last year, 1 goal, 0 assists. So he didn't pull up any trees with his goal contributions at Braga, but he is a very good player that's been in and around the Spanish footballing world for a couple of years. He's 23 years old, so he's still very young. I think this year is a massive breakout season for him, wherever he is. Valencia are willing to listen to offers for this guy. You could probably get him between 3 to 6 million, so it's a drop in the ocean. And it's a player that's easily good enough for the Premier League. Whether he starts for us, I'm not too sure. But again, we need squad fillers. We need players to bulk out our squad. So Uros Rakic is the last player on our list, and he is also very similar to. I'm trying to think of the best, a really good comparison. He's not done it very well, but so if you look back to Donny van der Beek at Ajax, that role that he played, where he was sort of 1 minute he was the six, and then he was the most forward thinking midfielder. He was the progressive midfielder. He could do both of those things. That's exactly what Rakic does. He can play as a six alongside a out and out DM and then break, or he can play slightly forward if that's the job you're asking him to do. So it's a player that he has a lot of utilities, and he is a player that can play in multiple positions in midfield. Same as Alex Scott, same as Norhouse. They all are interchangeable. They can play in different positions within that midfield setup. So it's something we definitely need to look at. We're so pigeonholed with our names. Every name that I've seen us linked to is a player that you already know or you've seen so much of that costs phenomenal amounts of money. And there's so many players out there that are so much cheaper to do the same job, if not better. Prime example is Paulina for Fulham. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, and I'd love us to sign him. But 50, 60 million for a player that cost them, 14 or 15 or whatever it cost them, we could just go out and find him somewhere else if we weren't so blinkered to look at the Premier League and domestic players and players that have played in the Premier League. Because that's all we seem to do. Our scouting setup and our recruitment process traditionally has been horrific. So that's why I'm hoping old Timmy is on this little transfer targets that he handed Moyes. I'm hoping that there's some players that we've never heard of, because that excites me more than buying a player from a Premier League club for an extortionate amount of money that inevitably is going to come to us and flop. Because that's what happens, isn't it? But anyway, I've rambled on now for over 20 minutes. That is my transfer list. Again, if you want to look at any of these players I've talked about or any players that you know, transfermarket.com. I'm not a sponsor. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, so I don't really know why I'm plugging it. But it's a very good website. It's what I use. I will also, quickly before we jump off, Scamacca is likely to be off because he said he wants to go back to Roma. But I couldn't care less at this point. I like Scamacca. I think he could be a great player, but he doesn't want to be here, so let him go. So I will do a separate scout report or transfer target list for the striker position, because let's be honest, we all like goals. So I'll do an in-depth one for strikers in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that one. But until the next one, guys, if you haven't already, please like the video, drop a comment down below, make sure you answer that question over here. And until the next one, guys, come on, you irons.